Bit of wind. Oh, we're taping. We're taping. Oh, up the hill of beans. It's as badger as it seems. So, some more Master Margarita, why don't we? It's a bit windy, I hope this mic's alright. Where are we? Chapters 5 and 6, that's what we're going to talk about today. No, chapters 6 and 7. 6 is called Schizophrenia, as was foretold, or something like that. And we follow Domney. Remember that he's just been taken to the asylum, or the clinic, as the doctor refers to it. He says it's not a madhouse, it's a clinic. And you're free to go anytime you want. The Domney's turned up in his long johns and his torn shirt. And the doctor's like, does he have any signs of delirium tremens? No, he doesn't. And remember, Ryuchov is there with him. He's another poet from the Gribayev who accompanied Domney on his journey to, I hope we're going to call it the asylum. Let's call it the asylum. And Ryuchov actually starts to wonder whether he's done the right thing. Is Domney mad? Because right now he looks pretty alright. I'll take the hood down a wee bit. So the doctor's questioning him. He says, what were you doing out and about in your long johns? And Domney's like, well, he explains the story. He says, we've got to catch the consultant. So the doctor says, fine, I'll let you go. You can go and make a phone call if you want. But yeah, who are you going to phone? He says, I'm going to phone the police. I'm going to get them to come with motorbikes and machine guns. We've got to catch the consultant. And the doctor says, fine, go make your call. So he does, he makes his call, and the police hangs up on him, which causes him great consternation. He slams down the receiver, and then the doctor says, well, we can let you go if you want, but we'll keep the bed warm for you. So what do you mean keep the bed warm? He says, well, I can guarantee you'll be back within the hour. I said, what do you mean I'll be back within the hour? He says, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go and get the police. He says, well, what are you going to tell them? And I'm going to tell them about Pontius Pilate. He says, yep, the police are going to bring you straight back here. So that's the deal. And the diagnosis, why he kind of freaks out about that, and they get a nurse to come and give him an injection, a sedative, which he gets and then goes to sleep. So we leave him in the asylum, and then Ryuchov goes back to Moscow, and we get a description of Moscow as he approaches towards dawn, and I find it to be quite a peaceful description. Just the way it's written, it gives us a transition between the supernatural and the real. Just going into Moscow, it feels very real and grounded, and as it should be. And then we get a description of a man made of metal statue on a pedestal, which is Pushkin. It's a monument to the writer Pushkin, which any Russian reader of the time would have known. It's a very famous statue in Moscow. Is it on Pushkin Square even now? So its cultural relevance is obvious to anyone of the time who would be reading it in Russian. It doesn't name it as Pushkin, so I looked up reasons for why that might be, and it's to do with the fact that Pushkin is immortalised, but he's presented as a man made of metal. And if you think of the word immortal, You remember Pilate shouting out, "Immortality, immortality." And it seems that we're looking at immortality from two different sides. Pushkin is known by everyone in Russia as the grandfather of Russian literature. In fact, he's responsible in some ways for the Russian language, because before his time, the aristocracy, intelligentsia spoke French, which you'll know all too well if you've read War and Peace. That's a big feature of War and Peace. And the division between the times of French being spoken and of Russian being spoken due to Napoleon's invasion of 1812. So Pushkin's on the other side of that. He's on the Russian side, and he would have spoken French, but he would have started to write Russian poetry, or poetry in Russian rather, and he would have had to have come up with words for things that didn't have Russian words yet. This is what I learned from Orlando Figes in his book Natasha's Dance, which is one of my favourite books actually. So yeah, Pushkin's immortalised. Now bear in mind that Pushkin himself was kind of a roguish character. You know, he was a womanizer, he was killed in a duel. He, kind of a bit like Robert Burns actually in Scotland. So I know about him, obviously being Scottish, we're kind of brought up in that culture. In fact, I grew up in Burns country, in Ayrshire. I'm still in Ayrshire actually, just a different bit yet. But anyway, so yeah, Pushkin was roguish and rakish, but wrote this poetry and became immortalised in the same way that Burns did. And he's now regarded as a cultural, historical figure for the good. Whereas Pontius Pilate was immortalised for his cowardly decision, the one where he condemned Yeshua in the novel to death, ratified the death penalty. So that's kind of what I'm taking from this, and the reason why Pushkin's not mentioned as Pushkin, I don't know, because that would give him a name. I don't know. I think perhaps it wouldn't have done any harm to have named him as Pushkin, so there must have been a reason not to. Let me know what you think. I don't know, I asked ChatGPT and none of its answers seemed to make sense to me, so yeah, let's hear it if you've got any ideas. So Ryukhov gets back to the Griboyedov and he meets Alexander, what's his name? Archibaldovich, who is the manager of the Griboyedov. He's referred to once again as a pirate, which reminds me that in my analysis of chapter 4, was it? The 4's the pursuit, 5's the Griboyedov. In my analysis of chapter 5, it mentions the pirate, and in that part I talked about Ostranenia, about how the supernatural or fantastical is turned on its head and turned into the mundane when we get a description of the Caribbean seas and the pirate sailing under his flag, and then it says, but no, the mystics were wrong, and it goes on to describe the Griboyedov in very real terms, the iron grid or the iron railing on the fence, and the soup and the people with bloodshot eyes, and you know, reality, social realism I suppose. And I said that it was referring to Voland because it talks about a man in black tails with a pointy beard, and then it refers to him as the pirate. So it wasn't clear in the text, so I'll give myself a pass there, but I was mistaken. It was not Voland it was talking about. And it referred to his black eyes. It said he was black-eyed. So, I don't know, Voland had one black eye and one green eye. Does that make him black-eyed? Possibly. But Archibaldovich, He's the pirate that it's referring to, and the Griboyedov is his ship, basically. So apologies for that misunderstanding. And we leave Ryukhov drinking shot after shot of vodka and starting to feel better. Vodka, the perennial medicine. So that's where we leave that chapter. Then we move on to chapter 7, which is called The Bad Apartment. And this one's a really interesting chapter. So we're introduced to a new character, Styopa Likhadzeyev, who's the director of the Variety Theatre. He wakes up with a terrible hangover to find a man in his room. The man's been waiting for an hour for an appointment that was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Styopa's got no idea who he is, what he's talking about. So the stranger says, well, I can see you've got a hangover. It's not painkillers you need. Is it pyramidion, I think they call it. I think some of the translations use aspirin as a translation here. The one I'm reading, which is Aplin, calls it pyramidion. He says that's not what you need. He says what you need is a hair of the dog. And lo and behold, there just happens to be a spread, caviar and chilled vodka and mushrooms and sausages and tomato sauce. So he has a shot or two of vodka and feels a lot better. And they have a conversation after we've learned a little bit about the flat itself, which used to belong to a widow of a jeweller. And we learn all about how the 3 lodgers that she had in her flat, who rented rooms, they all disappeared. The policeman disappeared. Then she herself disappeared, as did her maid. And it was put down to witchcraft. It's an interesting scene, and it's written in a kind of humorous style, but it's obviously referring to how political people or the bourgeois would be disappeared after the revolution, and the secret police would come knocking at the door, and it was just the way life was at that time in Moscow and Petersburg and Russia in general, but in the cities particularly. I remember reading a book about Shostakovich. It's called something Time in Our Time. I can't remember the title of it or the author. I'll put a link below if I remember. And it was all about how Shostakovich slept with a suitcase packed, waiting for the knock at the door. So we get that description of the flat, and then it goes on to discuss why Voland is there. Now seemingly he's signed a contract with Styopa, director of the Variety Theatre, for 7 performances of black magic at the theatre. And Styopa's like, what? I don't remember any of that. He said, no, dear sir, take a look at the contract. And he takes a look, shows him the contract, and sure enough, there's the signature. So yeah, it's a weird one. He's beginning to wonder about whether he's got memory loss from his drunkenness the night before. So it's weird. So he goes to call the Variety, wants to talk to the financial director to see what's going on. Which he does, and the financial director says, yes, the black magic, we've got extra playbills ordered, and there's the sum that was paid to him, and blah blah blah. So okay, he's got confirmation that this is actually real, and looks in the mirror and sees the man in the check trousers and the pince-nez. Kind of freaked out by that, and then he looks in the mirror again and sees the black cat. So he shouts through to his maid, Grunya, what's the deal with the black cat? Whose is it? And Voland replies, don't worry about the black cat, it's mine. And Grunya's no here. You gave her, no, I've sent her to Voronezh, is it? To go and visit her family, because you never give her any time off. So that's a bit freaky. he goes back into the living room and he sees that there's the guy in the check trousers, there's the black cat, and then someone else appears. The guy with red hair and a fang and a physiognomy that, well, he's not described as being very pretty. So the man in the check trousers, or is it Voland? One of them says to him, there's one too many people in the flat, and that one is you. So the cat says, shoo! And the room starts to spin, whereupon he kind of faints and wakes up in Yalta. He has to ask a passerby, a guy who's smoking and spitting into the water. Where am I? He says, you're in Yalta. So that's where we leave that chapter. There's loads in it. We've got new characters. We still don't have their names, apart from Azazello. We have been given Azazello's name. He's the guy with the fang and the red hair and the physiognomy that, I don't know, would curdle milk or something. So we don't know the others' names yet, so I won't give them away, but they'll come. So that's us, on to the next chapter.